And I think in the context of this video, you'll see that planning permission comes with it a huge number of hoops and hurdles and delays that you need to go through in order to get permission, when it's really geared up for the people that can afford that process. You know, major landowners can afford to wait, sometimes years on end to get planning permission, whereas if someone's just got a small loan to buy a place or to do an extension to their property, and it's based on how long they've got the loan out for, i.e. how long does it take to get planning permission, then you'll kind of get an understanding as to the value of permitted development rights. So this video is all about planning permission versus permitted development rights. I'm going to be running through the benefits and the cons of each, what you need to consider for each option, and it will hopefully give you an idea as to which way you want to go when it comes to securing whatever type of development you want to secure. Maybe you're just interested in a site and you want to explore each of these options to see which would be the most beneficial for your site. I think by the end of the video you'll get an idea as to my view on the situation, but we'll see. So recently I went to an industry event and it was about real estate, and some big politicians were there, major architects, surveyors, land developers, planners obviously, and they were talking about the state of the economy and the state of the market. And one of the points that came up was deregularization, and they were talking specifically about the expansion of permitted development rights in the last few years and how it created really bad examples of place and quality of living and residential units, and how there was not enough that they could control to ensure that quality was assured. And in the audience, an architect near me said, "Here, here," and there were a few kind of nods of agreement, and I was sitting there very surprised at that. And there was no kind of duration of, probably like people like watching this video, someone that just wants to use their real estate portfolio to create some passive income. And I was really surprised at that. It made me realise that in the industry there's a huge blind spot about the value of planning and what it does for general people. Obviously the planning and the whole regularization of it is geared towards extensions of cities, thousands of homes being built, major developments. Not much consideration are towards small landowners and smaller developers. So it was really surprising, and I think that's where this kind of video I think is going to be helpful to people, because people are always considering whether planning permission versus permitted development rights is the way to go. And I think in the context of this video you'll see that planning permission comes with it a huge number of hoops and hurdles and delays that you need to go through in order to get permission, when it's really geared up for the people that can afford that process. You know, major landowners can afford to wait, sometimes years on end to get planning permission, whereas if someone's just got a small loan to buy a place or to do an extension to their property, and it's based on how long they've got the loan out for, i.e. how long does it take to get planning permission, then you'll kind of get an understanding as to the value of permitted development rights. So the government brought in permitted development rights to encourage house building, because there's a big issue with land supply and delays of delivering houses. So the government lowered the barrier to entry and encouraged smaller developers to bring housing to the market, and that's where the permitted development rights came in. So when you're looking at things to consider, I will quickly now run through what you need to consider with planning permission and then compare that to permitted development rights. And if you want to learn more about the planning process and how you can use it to unlock value, look at the potential of your site for development, then click the link below to learn more. So when it comes to planning permission, what you need to understand is what planning permission is that you are proposing a development that is compliant with planning policy, and each council has different policies relating to different types of development. They'll have design policies, amenity policies, economic policies, things like that. So what comes with that is a whole host of assessments that you need to make. So the first thing you need to consider is the planning history. In the planning history, is there anything in the planning history that is a red flag? Are there any issues that are from developments nearby or on the site that you're considering where the council has looked at their policies and decided that that development was unacceptable because it didn't meet the policies? That's a really critical thing to look at when you're looking at planning permission. And linked to that obviously is the planning policies. When you do the research, is there anything in the planning policies related to, say, if you're trying to secure an HMO, is there an HMO density issue? Are there design issues that you need to be aware of? Is there any guidance to the area that you're in? So for instance, conservation area guidance or specific guidance to particular types of development like rear extensions or alterations to houses, that kind of thing. And then is there anything in the site and surroundings that you need to be aware of? Are you near a listed building? Are you in a conservation area? Is there anything overlooking your site that would prevent you from developing your site? And what's the scale of the local area? If you want to expand, increase the site height of your building, is there anything in the nearby area that's anything like that? that might limit your ambition or give you an idea that that's possible. And then when you're going through the planning permission route, you have to then apply for planning permission. And this is where you get into the issues that everyone has with planning permission. First of all, you're dealing with planning officers. And as everyone knows, when you're dealing with a planning officer, or if you haven't come across the planning system yet, you're going to find that the quality of the officer you get and the level of contact you're going to get with them and the level of information they're providing with you is going to be so varied that it leaves people guessing all the time. And that is the biggest issue with planning permission. There is no certainty because you're not sure about how one day one planning officer is going to be allocated to you and you don't know how you're going to deal with them. You may not be able to contact them at all until decision day. So that's a real problem. After you apply for planning permission, you have to go out to consultation. That's a statutory process. And when that happens, you'll find that residents are going to get very, very vocal, depending on what area you're in. But more often than not, planning seems to incite a lot of interest in development. So you might find that a lot of objections are received, and that may raise issues with the planning officer that they didn't foresee, and it may impact the potential for your development. The next step is negotiations. Whatever type of development you want to do, a planning officer might see it, and then there'll be a negotiation process to either, maybe they want to reduce the scale of what you're trying to achieve, or maybe they're trying to get more affordable housing contribution out of your site. That's a key thing to consider. Permission comes with it, and contributions that can be financial, or it could be more jobs, or it could be something like a skill centre if you're doing something major, or it could just be contributions to local highways improvements. That one is quite common. The next big one that everyone I think associates with planning permission is delays. There is an 8-week deadline, but I don't know recently of that being consistently met across councils. You will find that when it comes to 8 weeks, you'll either quickly get an email from the council that says, if you don't do this, we're going to refuse it, or you're going to get an email saying, we would like to extend the deadline for this application, which will allow them to give them more time to assess the application. That is very common. And I've done videos about why. Essentially, there's pressure from all angles. Councils need to meet their deadlines. So in order to show that they are meeting their deadlines, they extend the determination period. So it shows that they are in fact meeting their deadlines, even though it's kind of artificial. And when it comes to planning permission, if you haven't done enough research, or if you get a council on a bad day, you could get refused, and that comes with it a whole appeal process. You have to submit a statement as to why your development is acceptable, and the timescales for that are hugely drawn out. There is no statutory period that an appeal has to be determined by. You're going to start getting letters of first of all validation, and then start letters. Then you'll start getting dates, but before that you could be waiting a very, very long time for the inspectorate to essentially even start looking at your appeal, particularly if you're dealing with a loan that's time sensitive and you need planning permission. Appeals process, you might think that it's a way of sidestepping the council, but just know that it adds on a lot of time that you need to be aware of. Having said all that, planning permission, and I've kind of alluded to, planning permission is good if you're necessary if it's going to be a new office building or houses, or a kind of town centre extension to provide more housing, or if you're going to do anything controversial that falls outside of permitted development, then planning permission is the way to go, and it's the only way to go. So you're going to have to navigate this whole process and be prepared for it. So now moving on to permitted development rights. Permitted development rights right now are absolutely brilliant if you are interested in residential development. That's true if you own your own house, if you have a block of flats, if you're interested in getting consent for residential, even if the site you have is not residential, and if you're looking at developing more units on a building already. All of those things are possible under permitted development rights, which weren't previously. So when it comes to a single house, you can do rear, side and roof extensions. You can do rear extensions up to 8 meters if you meet the right tests. Changes of use, this is what has caused so much interest in permitted development rights recently. Changes of use now, as of about 5-6 years ago, have opened up huge amounts of properties that weren't possible for residential development. So we're talking about things like Class MA permitted development rights, which is commercial to residential. That now includes all of what is Class E, so that includes retail, office, gyms and a number of other things. All can be converted to residential without planning permission. The other one is Class G, where you can do the upper floors of a kind of town centre use into residential up to 2 units. That's a big one. And the other one that not many people are talking about, but is a really big game changer for permitted development rights, is you can add new units under permitted development. So if you're a freestanding block of flats, there is the possibility to go up 2 stories. provided it is for new flats. Now that's huge. You can do that for a residential block of flats, you can do that on commercial buildings, you can do that on mixed use buildings, you can do it on terrace buildings. The general permitted development order now has expanded so much that it includes a massive amount of development that's possible, and has really lowered the barrier to entry for property developers. Now, within the permitted development rights, there are tests that you need to meet, but they are significantly less, and they are much more assured than going through the planning permission process. So one of the huge thumbs up with going down permitted development is that there are no negotiations. You may be in contact with the officer, they may ask for more information, but the point is with permitted development rights, it's black and white, and you go through the general permitted development order and it will tell you exactly the tests that you need to meet. There's no policy requirements, it's not different between different councils. You just read the PD rights and you get a full understanding of what's possible on your site. 56 days is the statutory deadline for permitted development applications. There are no financial contributions. There are some councils, particularly within London, where even if you're proposing an additional 100 square metres of floor space, you'll need to provide affordable housing contributions. There are no affordable housing contributions or contributions at all through permitted development rights. It is a permitted development, it's your right to exercise that right. So you just need to make sure you meet the right tests, and there's no requirements for financial contributions, which is massive. You don't need to meet planning policies, you just need to meet exactly what the permitted development order says. If you meet what it says and you satisfy it, then you should be getting permission. Now, appeals are possible under permitted development, but because the process is so black and white, it's much clearer what you can and can't do. The likelihood of appeals is far less. So I think by now you kind of get an understanding as to what my view is on planning permission or permitted development. So right now, if you're interested at all in residential development of any kind, then exploring permitted development rights is a really good way to go. There's a massive amount that you can do under permitted development, and it's almost worth considering, how can I use permitted development on a site rather than should I or should I not? Because like I said, if you've got a loan or something like that that's time sensitive, permitted development rights give you that certainty of time, and you're far more assured of knowing whether or not you can get permission for something. Now, I've done another video on expanding on what you can do on the general permitted development order. Have a look at that. But that is my view. But right now, permitted development rights are a huge opportunity for people, and until they change, I encourage you to take full advantage of them.